Hello and welcome to Projector, and on this episode we join Ricky Gervais as he revives his signature character for Life on the Road. A camera crew is sent to catch up on David Brent, played by Ricky Gervais, now working as a travelling rep for toiletry company Lavachem, and where he is 15 years after he was showcased in the reality documentary The Office. Brent, unhappy with the situation, takes time off to showcase his ambitions as a singer, fronting the band Foregone Conclusion on a tour financed out of his own pocket. In Brent's usual style, the tour goes disastrously awry, and even his own bandmates hate him, but David is determined to live the rock and roll lifestyle no matter the cost. Ricky Gervais became a household name after the success of The Office, which ran for 2 series between 2001 and 2003 and closed off with a pair of Christmas specials that year that really helped popularise the mockumentary format. It very much emulated and satirised that kind of fly-on-the-wall documentary style that you still see to this day, and such was its success, in fact, that it was exported all around the world. Of course, that much is obvious, especially to American viewers, because their version of The Office is very popular in its own right and is quite a different show from the British version, in fact. And although I have a certain affinity for The Office, it's not my favourite of Ricky Gervais and Stephen Merchant's collaborations. I think Extras, their follow-up, is a superior series. It feels far more polished in what it wants to do. I have to admit I was quite sceptical about Gervais bringing Brent back for a film, and not just because of the usual feelings about UK TV to film adaptations, but also because Gervais's filmography is very patchy. There are things that I like that he's done, like Ghost Town or the underrated Cemetery Junction, but then you've got misfires like The Invention of Lying, and most recently Special Correspondence, which premiered on Netflix to not find very much of an audience, and those that did seek it out weren't particularly positive on it. And in general, Gervais's work in recent years has been not well appreciated by many people. Derek in particular has had a very mixed reception. And Gervais has flirted with bringing Brent back for a while now. In fact, he revived him previously for a comic relief short in 2013, where he was showing off his aspirations as a singer-songwriter, and this very much seems to be the sort of seed that set up the development of the film, because many of the recurring elements from that sketch are brought back for this film, including rapper Doc Brown, who has a notable co-starring role in this film, just like he did in that sketch where they sung Equality Street. Brent's a difficult character to bring to the screen because he's, by definition, quite hard to like. He's meant to be the bad boss. He's meant to be that sort of insufferable, higher-level guy that always likes to throw around jokes and likes to sort of play up to the cameras. That's very much what Brent was all about. And in the confines of a 30-minute TV show, that was fine because you still had other characters that broke that up. With a film, he has to be front and centre, and that's very much the case here. Brent is in almost every scene of this movie, maybe barring 1 or 2. The film does go about addressing this issue. It does try to make changes to the Brent character to try and make you like him more, but it's still somewhat difficult to warm up to him. I will say this, the film is not trying to be The Office. It definitely feels like it's within that world, but it's very much a spin-off. The Office segments are very much sort of bookends to the film more than anything else. You can feel the fact that Stephen Merchant is not involved in this movie. It very much feels like Gervais's baby. Brent seems to have developed, in this movie especially, this very unusual tic where he does this weird laugh sigh like that. He does that a lot in this movie, and Gervais is directing, and this is somewhat unfortunate because he seems to do that at almost every juncture where there's supposed to be a joke, and it really gets annoying. It's amusing a couple of times, but after hearing about 50 times over the course of 90 minutes or so, it does begin to grate somewhat. The film picks up with the Brent character 15 years down the line, and again, it's a very different dynamic to how it was in The Office, whereas in the original show, people tolerated Brent's antics to a certain extent, his attempts at practical jokes and humour, because he was the boss. Here, he's just another employee, and everyone else hates him at Lavachem. Within the universe of the film, Brent became a 5-second celebrity because he was the face of that documentary, and it's shown that that did have a scarring experience on him. It did bring him some amount of shame and did damage him in some way. And this is what I mean by the fact that the movie tries to make you sympathise more with Brent as a character. It really makes you try and understand his mindset and tries to make him a little bit more empathetic in its own way. Once we're out on the road though, those sort of concerns, especially with regards to story, are very much secondary. It very much becomes a series of sketches and bits as we go from one concert to another. And the movie exists in this kind of weird place where it's bigger than the show that it's spun off from, and it has to be because it's a movie on the big screen, but it's kind of hampered by the fact that it still has to be small. It still has to be so because otherwise it doesn't make sense with the character. Certainly when I was watching the film, it never screamed anything like something that should be in a cinema. It feels very televisual in its approach. The camera work is very point and shoot. That's in keeping with the style of the show that it originated from, but it makes very little concession for cinema audiences. Admittedly, this will be less of a concern to viewers outside the UK and Australia, where the film's getting a theatrical release, because in other countries this film is being released on Netflix, which has become Gervais's pretty much new home now, and that kind of style would probably be less of a distraction than it is seeing it on a big screen. It's hard to shake the feeling, again, like many UK TV to film adaptations that have come out recently, that this probably would have worked just as well, if not better, as a TV special, as something that you would see over Christmas, because if you were to compact this into an hour, for example, it would certainly take out a lot of the material that just doesn't really work. Obviously, Gervais goes after certain targets. There is subject matter that revolves around race and disability, and those tend to work because they connect to Brent as a character, and they don't feel mean-spirited, they feel quite organic. There are quite a few laughs in this movie, but you're also cringing at the same time. There is a lot of real intense cringe humour, and though those sequences do work quite well, the problem is that there is a lot of material that could easily be left on the cutting room floor, and especially when Gervais goes after some quite low-hanging fruit. For some reason, there are 3 different sets of gags about overweight women. I don't know why he keeps coming back to that in this film. Especially in a scene where Gervais takes some people back to his hotel room to try and have a good time to spite his band members. That sequence doesn't really go anywhere. It doesn't have a really funny payoff other than this lady's overweight and she's eating a lot. Why is this in the movie? Although this is very much a showcase for Gervais, he does make a little bit of room for rapper-comedian Doc Brown, aka Ben Bailey Smith, who plays Dom Johnson, who is the rapper that accompanies Brent and Foregone Conclusion throughout the film. And I kind of wish that there was a little bit more time spent with this character, because he doesn't get a whole lot of funny material to himself. That is a shame, because the relationship between Brent and Dom provides some of the best material of the film. Brent was Dom's agent, but he basically used him as a stepping stone to restart his own career, and all Dom is doing now is providing the odd guest verse on some of Brent's tracks, but basically being completely underused and kept in Brent's shadow, even though he is the one that obviously has far more talent. That does have some pathos, because you can clearly tell that Dom feels in some way indebted to Brent for discovering him, while at the same time Brent is clearly keeping Dom around because he wants a young black rapper that makes him look cool hanging around the entire time. The scene that's easily the most button pushing is the one that's most effective on both a comedic and a dramatic level, because they're coming back to the hotel one night drunkenly, and there's a bit of racial banter between them that gets quite intense, and it's not really meant in an offensive way, it's purely to underline how much that Brent wants to be cool, he wants to have this validation between them, and it's painfully funny. When it comes to the songs themselves, I did find a lot of them quite funny. I think it's well documented that Gervais did front a band in the 80s, and he's obviously still got some musical ambitions that this film allows him to showcase, and it is a little bit self-indulgent in some level, because there is a lot of extended scenes of Gervais as Brent in character singing these songs. Despite the lyrics, they're not badly put together. On a production level, they're actually quite decent, and this should come as no surprise, because Gervais has had a lot of behind-the-scenes help. He's had Chris Martin working on the songs, and Andy Burrows, who also co-stars in the movie. He also contributed songs as well. The songs are initially amusing, but they can't carry the entire length of their performances, and it does feel like the movie loses momentum whenever it goes to a musical performance by Brent. In terms of the tracks themselves, it's quite amusing in concept, especially the idea of Brent's music, because it's very much rooted in the 80s. It's very much an outdated style, and a lot of it is protest songs. Again, it very much fits in with Brent as being someone who is quite well-intentioned, and he knows that rock and roll is all about sticking it to the man and standing up for the little guy, but he just doesn't quite get it. He doesn't really have the connection to the material. He's Googling things and looking up things on Wikipedia and just sticking the facts straight into the lyrics. He's talking about dwarfism and Native Americans, but he doesn't really properly feel the plight of them. And those songs in particular, like Lady Gypsy or Native American, those are easily the funniest tracks in the film. Unfortunately, that lack of a story to give it purpose and drive really comes back to bite it in the final third, because unfortunately, all the major dramatic developments suddenly seem to happen in the final 20 minutes of the movie. And if Gervais had written this better, he would have seeded that throughout the running time. And he does to a certain extent, but not nearly enough to justify the ending. It's established, again, but to try and make Brent more of a sympathetic character, that he is wrestling with depression, that he is, to some level, aware of just how everyone else perceives him. And it gives us a much more vulnerable side to that character, but you only see it in little flashes here and there. Brent is going around the country, he's paying for everything out of his own pocket, and he's digging himself into a hole financially, and there is that sense of tragedy there that is very characteristic of Gervais's work, but it feels a bit half-formed here. I would have liked it if Gervais took more of a risk here to try and play more towards drama to some extent, because it would have made the ending far more effective. It would have made the payoff work better. As it stands, it feels a little bit disingenuous. You can't suddenly have the character flip into sort of depression like that. And the ending, it tries to be sentimental, it tries to have this small little positive, hopeful note for the character, but it's less sentimental than bordering on mawkish. It's very much reminiscent of something that he would have done in Derek, for example. On the whole, though, this is a perfectly decent return for the David Brent character that doesn't embarrass itself. It doesn't undermine the legacy of the series that it spawned from. It is slightly unnecessary. The character was wrapped up at the end of those Christmas specials to some extent, but honestly, if you're a fan of Gervais and if you're a fan of the Brent character, there's plenty to like here. I think there is plenty that you will enjoy. Is it a return to form, though? Not quite, but it is certainly better than a lot of his recent work. It does show that there is still some mileage in Gervais yet. Life on the Road is a decent revival of the Brent character that about justifies Gervais bringing him back after all these years. There's a sort amount of laughs and cringes, often at the same time, but there's definitely moments where the thin premise feels overstretched, with the story itself feeling like an afterthought. The songs in the film are occasionally hilarious, but they're too polished to be truly awful, never quite landing in Spinal Tap territory and cumulatively taking away momentum. Although it expands the character and is not simply a reheat of The Office, it still feels like something that would have been best suited as an hour-long TV special that would have given this a bit of discipline, with the sentimental finale being especially unearned. Coming up soon, we go on an adventure with swallows and Amazons, don't bet on breaking the bank, and Noel Clarke brings his gritty Hood trilogy to a close with Brotherhood. But until then, I'm Matthew Buck, fading out.